Believe it or not, we're at our last group of Native Americans that we're going to cover. So we've talked about the Eastern Woodlands, we've talked about the Southwest Desert, we've talked about the Great Plains, all of those groups of Native Americans, and we are finally at the Northwest Coast. So it's a very small section, if you see right here, kind of dark right there along the coast, up in like the Washington area, maybe parts of California, and then all the way up into Canada and Alaska. And it's kind of significant if you notice they're not very far inland, meaning they're right there on the coast, right up against the water. And that's something that becomes important, something that we're gonna point out. And if you notice, this might give you a clue, the fact that the whale was important. If you have heard of or seen totem poles, this is the group that actually used totem poles, and we're going to talk about that here in just a bit too. There were many tribes within the Northwest coastal region: Chinooks, Makahs, and, whoa, okay, guys. So here's the perfect example of don't get caught up on specific names of things, because this is my 6th year teaching this, and every year I look up this word and I never remember how to pronounce it. So I always call it the K tribe. I don't know. If you want to look up the pronunciation, you can put this into Google and look at it, but I'm not going to spend too much time, even though I just talked about it, but I'm not going to spend too much time on it. We're among the more populated tribes. Unlike other tribal regions, the Northwest Coast never developed democracy where all citizens have an equal say. And if you remember, in the other 3 groups that we've talked about, they all had some form of government, whether it was the Tribal Council, the League of Nations. They had some way for everybody's voice to be heard. And in the Northwest Coast region, these tribes, they did not have that. So instead of having representatives, people that would represent, all of the other people in the tribe when they had meetings, the wealthy people ruled the clan. And when we say wealthy, we just mean, normally we think of rich, so people that had the most money, the most things. And in this case, it may not have been money, it may have been possessions, things. So the people that had the most land, the most tools, whatever it may be, the wealthy people were the ones that ruled the clan. The wealthier a man became, the more power he held in his clan. They earned great respect by giving things away. If someone gave a gift to another, that person is expected to give 3 gifts back. Generosity was part of everyday life, and by generosity we mean, willing to give things to other people. And the wealthiest clan had the most power in the region. So being able to show off or kind of flaunt your wealth by giving gifts to other people was really highly respected, and was a big part of their culture. The Native Americans in the Northwest Coast had many resources for survival. They were fortunate for mild winters and summers, meaning that it wasn't too hot, it wasn't too cold. It was often cool and damp, which helped all living plants grow. They had rivers, lakes, and coastal waters to keep themselves and the animals they hunted hydrated and healthy. There were countless forests for the animals to habitat. Within this area, rich in natural resources, it made it easy for the Native Americans to be hunters, gatherers, and fishermen. They didn't have a need for agriculture since food was already so plentiful. So this was the first group that they didn't have a need for agriculture or farming, and it wasn't because the land wasn't able to be farmed. So when we talked about the Inuit, that Eskimo group, they weren't able to farm because the land wasn't right for farming. This group, the land was right for farming. They just already had so many things available to them to eat that they didn't need to farm anything. So that's pretty neat. The Northwest Coast was well known for its abundance of food, meaning lots and lots of food. Animals roamed and built their own homes throughout the Northwest Coast. They often migrated in the forest and by waterways. Some common animals hunted in these forests were rabbit, deer, and elk. They retrieved much of their food in the nearby water. So although they hunted on land, most of their food came from the water. And when we talk about them all deciding, these tribes staying close to the coast, that was part of it, because the water, the ocean, provided a lot of things for them, mostly food. They retrieved much of their food by the nearby waters. Salmon, seal, and whales were some of their fishing favorites, and they used harpoon-type spears to catch them. Whale was their main source of food, and it was the most difficult to catch, but worth the effort. This makes me think a little bit of that Great Plains group and how the buffalo was so important. The whale is almost kind of like the buffalo for this group. Sometimes it would take days to catch a whale. It would provide them with, so just like the buffalo provided lots of things for the Great Plains people, the whale is going to provide things like food, rope, containers, and they would even use the blubber meaning like the fat in the whale, for oil and to drizzle on food. So the oil wasn't just used for cooking oil, it would have been things that they could have used for energy, so like lighting lamps, those kinds of things. Northwest Coast people would travel by canoes made out of cedar wood called dugouts for fish and seafood. These Native Americans traveled by foot to gather food in the wild. There were different kinds of berries found on bushes, and shrimp, eggs, and oysters found in the water. They created their own baskets for gathering food, and sometimes a family design would be woven into the basket. Since the Northwest Coast people did not have to go far for food, their homes were sturdy and made for permanent residence. So it makes sense. It's not like the Great Plains people that moved around a lot. They had the teepees so that they could put the homes up and take them down quickly. In this case, they didn't have to go very far for food. Everything was available to them right where they were. So they made sure that their homes were sturdy and that they were permanent, so they weren't moving them around. Most of them lived in long rectangular buildings called longhouses. We talked about longhouses with the Eastern Woodlands, right? And they were very similar, but they do look a little bit different. And in the Poplet, you're going to look up Northwest Coast longhouses, and you'll see how they look a little bit different than the Eastern Woodlands. They were made from huge cedar planks. The enormous cedar trees would be cut down and then split with beaver teeth and stone axes. One opening served as a door to the home and one at the top to allow smoke to escape. Longhouses were so large that several families lived in one of them. Like all native tribes, the Northwest Coast people had many beliefs and customs. They had a medicine man called a shaman. He was known to control the spiritual forces and would use magic to help cure the sick. We've heard that in a couple other of the beliefs and customs sections in the other groups too, that sickness was normally explained by some sort of spiritual force or evil spirit, something like that. They would also construct totem poles. So we saw at the top totem poles. That's something else that you're going to look up in your Poplet, or different totem poles. But totem poles are more than just a decoration. So each animal or symbol carved onto the pole had meaning and was created to represent something in the creator's life. Only the creator of the pole was permitted to tell his story, and sometimes he chose to keep it a secret. So these totem poles were almost like big family stories that you would have outside your home. So it told a story. Each symbol or animal represented something different in that person's life. And the people that created the totem pole were the ones that could choose to either share or not share their story. Since there was no written language back then, this was an important artifact that helped us learn about their culture. When they were ready to raise and honor the totem pole, they often held a potlatch. And a potlatch is a party that would last for days with a magnificent feast, and guests would sometimes get up to 20 presents. It was a way to show off their wealth. So we talked about wealth and generosity was really important to these groups. So when they would hold a potlatch, instead of like how we would today, you'd have a birthday party and everyone would bring you presents. And this time, a potlatch would be where the host would have you come to their longhouse, or they would celebrate outside. But the host, the person hosting the party or throwing the party, would be the one to give out gifts. And up to 20 presents per person. So that's a lot to be able to show off their wealth. Don't you wish you could go to a potlatch? That's kind of fun. There's so much more to learn about the Northwest Coast. You guys are going to do a cause and effect activity. We're going to focus on different parts of the story. And then you're going to do a Poplet to be able to look up some of the terms that we've talked about. And if you need to refer back to this video or the reading, please make sure that you do so. Do it to it.